venerable members of the Mahasangha, members of the clergy of all faiths, distinguished former heads of states, the former Speaker of Parliament, honorable members of Parliament from all parties and members of civil society, and last but not least, one of my three political idols that I have openly stated during my political career. Two are sitting in the front row today, Honorable Karo Jayasuriya and Honorable Imtiaz Bakir. One is no longer with us, Mangala Samaravira. So I consider it a great privilege and an honor that you invited me, Ms. Imtiaz Bakir, to deliver the speech in English on behalf of your book launch. So thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is an absolute privilege to be here for the launch of this important work authored by Mr. Imtiaz Bakir on the political life and legacy of President Junius Richard Jayawardena. This book is not a biography, nor is it a simple critique. In the JR I disliked, Mr. Bakir offers a deeply personal and reflective account of a leader he once opposed and later came to understand with greater nuance. It is written with candor and intellectual honesty, exploring not only the personality of President Jayawardena, but also the ideas, tensions, and political realities that shaped Sri Lanka during one of its most transformative eras. What makes this work particularly valuable is that it does not attempt to reduce history into praise or condemnation. It invites readers to reflect on leadership, ideology, and the complexities of political decision-making in a changing country. In a time when public discourse often prefers slogans to reflection, this kind of historical sobriety is both rare and necessary. I approach this period not as someone who lived through it, but as someone who grew up in its aftermath. My generation did not witness the optimism or anxieties of that time directly. We inherited its institutions, its political architecture, and its unfinished debates. For many of us, studying Junius Richard Jayawardena is not an exercise in nostalgia. It is an attempt to understand the foundation upon which we are now expected to reform, rebuild, and reconcile. President Jayawardena remains one of the most consequential leaders in post-independence Sri Lanka. He believed the country needed a new direction. He believed the economy needed to be open. He believed the state needed to be more dynamic, and he believed leadership required decisiveness and also ambition. For those accustomed to incremental politics, his approach could feel abrupt. For others, it represented a long-awaited break from stagnation and insularity. History rarely produces strangers. It always encourages people to learn from its mistakes and to do better. The liberalization of the economy in 1977 introduced new industries, foreign investment, and a different kind of ambition. It signaled that Sri Lanka could engage with the world rather than fear it. For many entrepreneurs, professionals, and ordinary citizens, it expanded horizons. For others, it created new vulnerabilities, widened inequality, and placed stress on the social contract. The younger generation reads that moment as a case study in how reform without legitimacy often produces mixed outcomes. The constitutional reforms of 1978 reveal a similar duality. They introduced a powerful executive president designed to overcome the fragmentation and gridlock of parliamentary politics. It was a bold and intellectually coherent idea. The belief was that modernization required a centralized executive with the authority to accelerate development. Yet, constitutional architecture has consequences. Concentrated power can quicken decision-making, but it can also weaken accountability, dull institutional culture, and reduce democratic participation. Sri Lanka is still wrestling with this balance more than 40 years later. The ethnic tensions and violence of the early 1980s form another important chapter of that legacy. No serious discussion of that period can ignore how state decisions, militant responses, and social mistrust fed into one another and shaped national life for decades. For my generation, reconciliation is not an abstract matter. It is of national necessity. And it is impossible to pursue reconciliation without understanding the historical origins of trauma, fear, and grievance. To say this is not to assign blame or to absolve it. It is to study. Study is the only mature way for a democracy to learn. Too often, Sri Lankans swing between sanctification and demolition. We either turn our leaders into saints or we tear them down, often based on party loyalties that we have inherited. Neither approach helps a democracy grow. It is far healthier to evaluate leaders as complex figures who made decisions in complex times with consequences that extended far beyond their own administration. There is something else about President Jayawardena that deserves attention from those of us engaged in public life today. He was a leader with ideological clarity. He had a theory of governance. He held views about the role of the state, the economy, the citizen, and the Sri Lankans' place in the world. One may debate his conclusions, but one cannot claim that he lacked conclusions. In an age where politics is increasingly reactive and transactional, that level of conceptual ambition is noteworthy. The younger generation now confronts questions that echo the past. What kind of state should Sri Lanka build? What power should it centralize and what power should it devolve? How should economic growth be balanced with social protection? What does leadership look like in a multi-ethnic democracy? How do we rebuild political trust after crisis? None of these questions are new. They, ladies and gentlemen, are inherited. But inheritance does not require repetition. It requires responsibility. Our task is not to replicate the past, nor is it to reject it blindly. Our task is to bridge it, learn from it, and build differently where necessary. From the legacy of President Jayawardena, several lessons emerge for civic reformers today. First, economic reform without public buy-in is unstable. Growth must be accompanied by inclusion, transparency, and fairness if it is to endure. Second, constitutional innovation must balance ambition with humility. Strong leadership may enable transformation, but strong institutions are what sustain a nation when leaders change. Third, reconciliation cannot be postponed forever. Trauma does not disappear. It accumulates. And the longer it is ignored, the more costly it becomes socially, politically, and morally. Fourth, the democratic culture matters as much as the democratic procedure. Elections alone cannot carry the weight of a democracy. Participation, debate, and accountability must accompany them. This brings me to the importance of books like the one we launched today. Leaders should be written about. Their ideas should be studied. Their decisions should be debated, not to settle old scores, but to build a culture where learning and making mistakes is entirely possible. A country that does not study its leaders cannot expect to produce better ones in the future. President Jayawardena was a product of his time, and he shaped his time in return. His legacy contains achievements that open the country to new possibilities and decisions that cast long shadows. To evaluate him with honesty is not to diminish him. It is to take him seriously. For my generation, like I said before, he is not a figure of nostalgia. He is a figure of inquiry. He represents a chapter we must study carefully if we are to write the next one responsibly. 40 years from now, another generation will study this moment. They will ask, who merely managed the present and who dared to disrupt it. They will ask who defended comfort and who took risk, who waited for permission and who moved without it. That chapter has not yet been formally written, but the page is no longer blank. Before I end this speech, I would like to also rectify a small mistake I made when addressing the distinguished guest. I didn't see my dear family friend, the grandson of President late Jaya Jayawardena, Pradeep Jayawardena. And also, once again, even though my speech is concluded, we have one head of state here, President Maitripala Sirisena. We also have one of the best speakers that the Sri Lankan Parliament created, Honorable Karu Jayasuriya. We have many distinguished general secretaries, national organizers, former parliamentarians, former ministers, and civil activists here. I make a humble request from all of you present here today, because you all are the decision makers of this country. I would like to make a humble appeal from all of you that the younger generation needs to be nurtured. The younger generation needs to take this country forward. And it is the sole responsibility of the seniors that have held senior positions in this country to nurture the younger generation, to foster the younger generation, and to make sure that it is the younger generation that takes Sri Lanka forward. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
මේ කෘතිය පිළිබඳව විවිධ විචාරයන් පසුගිය දවස්වල අපිට දකින්නට ලැබුණා. මේ කෘතිය පිළිබඳව විචාරයක් ලබා දුන්නු